as I'm saying, this is the very first interview, the first TV interview that they did after the quick announcement. The following night after she went missing, that's the famous footage of them outside the actual apartment, and they look genuinely shocked, right? And believing what I believe about the case, I think they were being genuine. It's obvious to me that the grief that you see on Kate McCann the night after is her processing what she knows. That she knows Madeleine's dead, I believe, at that point, right? And Gerry's just trying to hold it together for the family. They have no choice to do this because otherwise they'll lose the other two kids, the twins. Right,
Yeah.
so I think they were in this impossible situation. This was the best of some horrible decisions that they had to decide on.
Words cannot describe the anguish and despair that we are feeling as the parents of our beautiful daughter Madeleine. We request that anyone who may have any information related to Madeleine's disappearance, no matter how trivial, contact the Portuguese police and help us get her back safely. Please, if you have Madeleine, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
So Carrie says this interview was May 25th, 2007.
It's literally 3 weeks afterwards. Well, I'll just let it play here and you guys decide if you think they're acting in a way that gives you confidence that they still believe that Maddie's alive. That's a key thing to try and detect in both their actual language, what they're actually saying, and notice what they're concentrating on, the messages that they're putting out, and try and notice if you detect any genuine desire to articulate how worried they are as to how Madeleine is at that present moment. What kind of danger is she in? Can the abductor please return her, leave her somewhere, look after her? Always forgiven if you just give her back. See if you can detect that in their language and their body language.
Gerry and Kate, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I'd like to begin by taking you back to the events of May the 3rd on that evening. Tell us how you discovered that Madeleine had gone.
As I think people are aware, we were checking regularly on the children, and it was during one of my checks that I discovered she'd gone. I mean, I can't really go into any details about that, but I'm sure any parent will realise how that felt.
Did the panic set in immediately?
Yeah, pretty much.
This is a resort that offers childcare facilities, babysitting facilities. Why then were the three young children left alone in the apartment while you were having a meal?
I mean, I think if you know the location here, which you've seen, what we did, I think, and we've been reassured by the fact in the thousands of messages from people who've either done exactly the same or said they would have done the same. And for us, it really wasn't very much different to having dinner in your garden and the proximity of the location. I think it's fair to say that, the guilt that we feel having not been there at that moment, irrespective of whether we had been in the other bedroom or not, will never leave us.
Do you blame yourself?
So it's obviously damage control at this moment, right? If she was truly abducted and it's due to the fact that they took too much of a chance by dining where they were, taking such a risk, it would be understandable that they would be defensive at this point, right? You can let them get away with that at this stage at the beginning because that's the actual direct questions that they got.
Yeah.
So you can't judge them too harshly just on that right there. I think, it's understandable that they would have to defend themselves there.
Well, how long was this after she was taken?
3 weeks.
Okay. I mean, I've never been in that position, and I am a firm believer that unless you've actually been in that position, you can guess what you would do, but you really don't have any idea. But yes, defending yourself, but hostility, I see reserved hostility towards those questions. You know, for me, like I said, I would expect to see something like, oh, God, no, I would never, we would never, blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing. For them, they're just very matter of fact, like they're trying to hold in some sort of anger or something. And I get, you know, you're angry because your kid's gone, but, you know, if you're being asked point blank questions about your, you know, whether you were involved in it, I would expect more.
You'd expect it to be more emphatic, because that's the implied insinuation in his question, is that you're responsible. That's the implication, you know?
Right. And like I said, I mean, if we're talking years and years, yeah, maybe you're sick and tired of the same questions, but 3 weeks after, if I'm getting the impression that you're implying or hinting or whatever that I had something to do with it, I'm going to come out very emotional about it, you know? Not with the reserved resentment that it seems like that they have.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I agree with that, Tracy. You detect more shame in her and anger in him. Yeah, but she kind of loses that sense of shame as the kind of weeks and months went forward, and I think that shame left, and she got way more defensive, more like Gerry. Gerry was just always the more assertive out of the two.
Regularly?
Certainly the first few days, I think the guilt was very difficult.
The first few days, the guilt was difficult? Are you kidding me? The first few days, and now you're over that guilt after a few days.
Right. I mean, honestly, to tell you the truth, I can imagine if it were me, I would be guilty till the day I die. I would feel guilty till the day I die. Clearly, regardless, you know, whether you think you did everything right or wrong, clearly something you did, if she's kidnapped, like they're proclaiming, something you did or didn't do caused her to be able to be kidnapped, you know? I'm not saying blame, but that internal guilt, that wouldn't go away within a few days, I wouldn't think.
Not a chance. And I think the reason that she's slipped up like that without even being aware of it is because she knows that she's dead. She has already processed her death. It's almost like what I was mentioning about the Sarah Boone case. Sarah Boone was more preoccupied with her guilt over her problems with alcohol than just being open and honest about the problems that she had, and actually, you know, articulating how devastated she was that her boyfriend was dead. It's kind of similar here. They're more preoccupied with defending themselves. You know, that their actions, even though they feel guilty, they shouldn't be held responsible.
But I think as time goes on, we feel stronger, and we felt very supported from that point of view.
Is there a lesson here, do you think, to other parents?
I think that's a very difficult thing to say, because if you look at it, and we try to rationalise things in our head, and ultimately what is done, and we do continually look forward, but we've tried to put it into some sort of perspective for ourselves. We're in a very safe resort. If you think about the millions and millions of British families who go to the Mediterranean each year, really the chances of this happening are in the order of 100 million to 1.
I think at worst we were naive. I mean, we're very responsible parents. We love our children very much, and I don't think any parent could ever imagine or consider anything like this happening.
Were you aware of the big public debate that went on in the immediate aftermath, and were you hurt by that?
Yeah,
naturally.
I mean, no one hurts you as much as the hurt that we had. But
did you hear that word that he used there?
What?
The hurt that we had.
Yes.
What, you don't still have that hurt now? Is it gone away?
Right. Right.
Happening.
Were you aware of the big public debate that went on in the immediate aftermath, and were you hurt by that?
Yeah,
naturally.
I mean, no one hurts you as much as the hurt that we had. But, you know, we've tried to remain very positive in our outlook. And even small levels of criticism make that hard when you're trying to do everything in your power to get your daughter back.
I know you've been very supportive of the Portuguese police investigation, but is there anything that you feel could have been done better, particularly in those crucial first 24 hours when Madeleine was missing and perhaps it was treated as a simple missing child as opposed to an abduction?
I think, you know, we are not looking at what has been done, and I don't think it helps at this stage to look back at what could and couldn't have been done. I think it's fair to say we expected a very British style response that you would expect if you were in a big metropolitan city. But you have to put it in context that we're in a tiny resort. But you know, that aside, the times for these lessons to be learned will be after the investigation is finished and not now. You know, it's an ongoing.
Why are they even caring about the lessons that are going to be learned by law enforcement or by investigators and how to kind of deal with these situations? Why is that even on your mind if Madeleine is still alive? You know, why are you projecting into the future, you know, about learning
Right.
lessons? It just doesn't make any sense.
If you didn't know when this interview was taking place, so a lot of the things they're saying, I could almost see being said, you know, 5-10 years down the road, you know,
Yeah.
the lessons learned, and even saying the hurt that they had. But I would have said, I would have expected something like the hurt that we had at that time, which clearly would be, you know, much more debilitating than 5-10 years down the road. Not that the hurt goes away, but anyways, this doesn't sound like something like 3 weeks into your child being kidnapped. Not at all. The things he's
No.
saying are things you would say, like I said, 5, 10, 15 years
Yeah.
later, you know? It's just weird. It's very weird.
It is.
Investigation, which has huge resources both from Portuguese and the British. They're working very, very closely with lots of expert help, and I know there's hundreds of pieces of information continuing to come forward, and I would strongly like to emphasise we would like anyone who's been in here in the 2 weeks leading up to the abduction to come forward if they have not already done so and upload their photographs, because we want Madeleine back and people can still influence that.
It was just so casual the way he said we want Madeleine back. You know, that's what we are aiming for. It's almost just like a rehearsed line, a policy line that they have to remember to say, we want her back. There's no emotion at all. Especially,
Like,
as you say, considering this is 3 weeks after and it's the first interview.
like Chris Watt saying, I just want them home. I just want them home. It's a lot like that, right?
Yeah.
So Roberta's saying in the comments, she said something like, remember, they are both doctors, plays a big part in the way they respond. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And I agree. Doctors can definitely, they've learned how to control a lot of their emotions, but this is their child. I mean, you would expect that their reaction, this is their own kid, it would be different. They still may be a little more reserved because that's a natural thing at this point, to be thinking more analytically and things like that. But it's still your kid, and your kid's gone, and you're claiming, if you believe that your kid is kidnapped, and you know, God knows what's happening to her at this moment in time, and this is your reaction 3 weeks later. I just find it.
Yeah, and as much as Roberta is right, and you have to bear that in context that they are, you know, they are both doctors, and that you have to bear that in mind. But yeah, I agree. I think there's, especially for the mother, if she still thought that Madeleine was alive at this time right now, there would be things involuntarily that would seep out from her that would make that obvious, I think, you know. And I've seen so many interviews, and as I say, I'm not just basing it on this one interview, but
Right.
in retrospect, looking back now at this, it seems apparent, you know.
I just want to say, Genetic Code said, his head shakes no when he says we want anyone to come forward. Okay, I just want to say this because I actually just watched this on the behavior panel last night, and they were talking about that. Again, baselines. Some people actually, the way, what they do with their heads, is it an emphatic? Are they shaking it emphatically? Is it part of their baseline, like something that they do in everyday conversation? All of that has to be taken into account. Just the fact that he's shaking his head no while he's making that statement doesn't necessarily mean that it's a body language thing.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to watch other interviews and look for that same
behavior pattern.
behavior.
And I would strongly like to emphasise we would like anyone who's been in here in the 2 weeks leading up to the abduction to come forward if they have not already done so and upload their photographs, because we want Madeleine back and people can still influence that.
So unconvincing. Just his tone didn't change in the slightest, when he said we want Madeleine back. Okay.
I was reading in the chat earlier, and I have to agree, he seems really angry. He seems very angry. And I don't know, maybe that's anger because his daughter's gone, or is there some other anger? They don't seem to be cohesive. They don't seem
together.
To be. Yeah. I so far I think they've only looked at each other like maybe twice, right? They don't seem to have that we're in this together, our child is gone and we're both hurting, we're here for each other kind of. I don't get that feeling from them whatsoever.
I agree. It feels like they're concentrating rather more so on the rehearsed lines or the rehearsed bullet points.
Yeah.
The kind of policy line that they need to stick to. That's where all their focus is, Which, when you compare that to how they looked during the first announcement to the cameras the following night, they were hugging each other. It was real,
Yeah.
Carrie just pointed this out here. This is on Madeleine's birthday, which is 9 days after she went missing. They don't seem to be panicked about where Maddie is, It's just, I know that you can get any still shot that might not represent exactly what's going on, but there's a lot of pictures like this.
Yeah. I think we've all, lost someone, and we're not even going to talk about a kid, but, that's kind of a thing when you lose someone. The first birthday you have without them, their first birthday after they're gone, the anniversary of when they died. And I can tell you that, the people that are really close to me that have passed away on their birthday, which was never close in time like this, even it's, a picture is just a moment in time, any part of that day, there was never a moment in time where I looked like that whatsoever. Yeah. It's not like I walked around all stoic, but, the whole, hey, we need to celebrate this for them. They would want us to, and you go through the motions, but do you feel
your face just wouldn't go into those positions, especially Gerry.
Yeah, this doesn't look to me like it's just like, smiling, being polite because somebody said something and you're being polite and you're smiling. Yeah, funny story. That's not what these look like, Yeah, so the contradiction of this look compared to how they're presenting themselves in the story 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later after this is very odd. Yeah, if anything, your mood would have gotten better. I don't know. How are they so jovial here, but then they do this interview talking about her, which is the press interview, hopefully to get it out there for the entire world. We want our daughter back, and, looks completely different.
I know, right? It's just doesn't add up, and it doesn't add up for a reason.
Looking back, did you see anything suspicious in the days leading up to her abduction? Did you notice anything? Have you been racking your brains to try to think whether people might have been watching?
We didn't.
If we did, we wouldn't tell you because it may be important information, but we didn't, It was such a relaxing holiday, and in fact, as a family unit, up until that night, And with the friends we were here, certainly for us, it was as good a holiday as we have had with the children up until that point.
You have to keep believing that Madeleine is still going to be found alive and well.
Absolutely. And
Do you ever, though, allow yourself to drift towards negative thoughts?
I think in the early days we did, and I think that's inevitable. I think any parent who's been through this.
In the early days we did. What?
I don't know. I'm just going to say, for me, 21 days into it, we're still in the early days. We're still in those early days. Like I said, this literally, if I didn't know better, I would think that this was filmed 5 years after the
I
fact.
know. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I was putting together some footage for the live on this with Lizzy, and I watched this first interview, but I could not believe what they were saying, what she just said there. They just want everyone to move on now to the, we're trying to bring awareness and we want to start raising funds to try and find Maddie and concentrate on the media side of things. You know, there's just, they know she's gone.
Do you ever, though, allow yourself to drift towards negative thoughts?
I think in the early days we did, and I think that's inevitable. I think any parent who's been through this does that, certainly in the first few days. We don't now. We're actually a lot stronger, a lot more hopeful now. And we have to be hopeful. It's what.
We don't now. We're okay now. We're stronger now.
Actually,
it's almost comical.
What got me was we're more hopeful now. I would think 3 weeks after she's been gone, I would be a lot less hopeful than I would have been the first couple days.
Exactly.
It's completely opposite of what you would have expect someone to be feeling.
Even though, you know, you kind of think, well, they are doctors, they're kind of cold in their profession anyway, they kind of have to be professional and all that. Regardless of that, there's things that subconsciously, if they thought she was still alive, that she biologically could not hide, it would come out of her, and it just isn't. And it's in her actual words and in her mannerisms, both her mannerisms.
I don't think the interviewer asks. I would have liked to say, "Why are you more hopeful now? What's happened? Why are you more hopeful now?"
Yeah,
because that's just the oddest friggin' thing.
Yeah.
Roberta says, "Weren't they out jogging and playing tennis days after?"
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that.
So if they have all these things, but now they're sitting in front of a camera being interviewed, why so stoic? Why put on this face? Why be this way? Did they think that being emotional would be bad? Or, I mean, how could that possibly look bad on your part if you showed some emotion?
You've just reminded me what their defense was in that regard. I don't know if it was in Kate's book or if this was somewhere else, but what they said was that the people that were advising them advised them not to show so much emotion during the interviews and the press conferences because they surmised that a kidnapper of a young child would get off on seeing them emotionally wrecked and in pain. That's apparently what the advice was to them.
Somebody should advise them that they shouldn't be caught laughing and having a great time.
Exactly right.
They should have been advised at that point, you know, no emotion should be no emotion. That means no giddy, happy stuff either. Yeah. Or taking naps. I don't know. It's just, it's odd.
Carrie says they didn't actually search for Maddie the night they reported her missing because it was cold and dark outside and they were non-functioning. Gerry had a nap? Wow.
Again.
I was under the impression that Gerry at least helped. That is crazy.
Yes, same, Tracy. Yes. The fact that it was cold and dark would have actually made it 10 times worse for me. Again, think about it. If you think your kid is out there, either with someone, not with someone, hurt somewhere, it's cold and dark, so you're not going to search. You're going to wait for daylight. I know search teams do that for their own safety, but me as a parent, no, I would not. I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, the shock and the adrenaline, you wouldn't be feeling the cold, right? If that was
Yeah,
if you
right.
genuinely thought she was taken and still alive, you know, you
It
would
was,
run through any weather.
well, you know, I'm not a body expert or anything, but if I were an attorney or a PR person, I would play this video for my client, say, whatever you do, don't do anything like this. Nothing like this.
Yeah, and as Roberta says, all that stopped when Clarence Mitchell came on the scene. Clarence Mitchell was the kind of PR guy, and I think he had worked for the government prior. This is how high level they were able to pull the attention from. You know, they literally had the deputy prime minister coming out and speaking to them. You know,
So why is that? Why is that though? I mean,
a good
they're
question.
doctors, I know, but are they doctors that knew people in high places already? I mean, I don't understand that.
It's a good question. You know, I mean, you know, they weren't part of. You know, they weren't exactly upper class. They were just like, you know, well-to-do middle class, a middle class family.
But if they
Um,
knew someone in
well,
a high place, that would explain a lot of it, you know?
well, I mean, you can go down other darker paths. I mean, there's people that believe it was even darker than what one might imagine with this, right? That some people believe that they knew there's a renowned child offender who was part of the government that stayed in the same village,
Yeah.
and they went to meet him for dinner. I think it was afterwards, I think. So people have accusations that go down that line, and one of the Tapas Seven as well. Um, he had allegations made against him by one of the family friends that wasn't at this trip, but was at a previous trip, and he was saying some incredibly dodgy things about Madeleine McCann. You know,
Oh, yeah, I remember on one of Lizzie's lives she talked about that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there are darker theories, basically, right?
Your guys is you know, not everything's put out on Front Street like it is here, but the way that this couple has been able to shut everything down, you know, even I can't say his name, the lead detective that wrote that book.
Mhm.
That's a level of power that seems
I know.
off centered from just a regular, you know, family that lost their child. It's just it's
Yeah.
odd.
Yeah, that was the point that I kind of failed to make there, is that maybe if those darker theories are true, maybe
Yeah,
that's the reason, right? That people in power have a reason to not let certain things be exposed here, right?
right.
You know,
Yep. I mean
who knows?
that makes that theory, whether you think that that's a conspiracy theory or not, but it does explain some of this other stuff that doesn't seem to have an explanation.
Yeah, and it's not entirely unfounded, especially when you think about the other side of things. Is I think we all know pretty much that they're guilty, right? Whether they're guilty of overdosing her accidentally, or if they're just guilty of neglect and she accidentally fell behind the sofa, right? Regardless, for some reason that doesn't seem explicable, the Tapas Seven all completely stayed loyal to them and stuck to their
Hmm.
stories all this time. Why is that? You know?
I don't know, but like you said, you know, those other things um, could be explained by, yeah. Let's just say Epstein, you know, that
Yeah.
look what's happened with that, and the silence and the things that have been used to keep those secrets for those people for so long.
Yeah.
There's proof it does happen. It's not just a fairy tale conspiracy theory kind of thing. It does happen. Clearly
It
it does.
does, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not all conspiracies are actually tinfoil conspiracies. There's genuine things that happen at a high
Yeah.
level,
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, I think a lot of times people think to just poo-poo it, but as you learn more things, like I said, you've got, you know, all this Epstein and the island, and who would have thought that? I mean,
Mm.
I guess some people would have thought that, but on the outset, just hearing it, the high level, it sounds stupid. It sounds made up. Like that doesn't happen. And you've got how many people, how many stars go into this island? That doesn't happen. And then guess what? It does. So you're like,
Crazy,
shit.
yeah. It's like something from a movie. What?
Yeah,
That
I
shit
know.
happened?
There's a saying, and it's kind of a little bit different, but just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. It's kind of like that. Just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not true, though. It doesn't mean it's not crazy true.
Yeah. God. Can you imagine if you were just to, just have access magically to, all the behind the scenes shit that goes on at a high level? I wonder how shocked you would really be.
Well, yeah. I think if that were the case, you probably would never sleep again. Honestly, you'd never let anybody you love leave your house. You'd never use a cell phone. I mean, it's probably all kinds of things. I think there's probably a lot of bliss in ignorance.
Yeah.
But in cases like this, like I said, them talking about like these sex rings and all this stuff going on. Like there was a time when, because there was, the satanic stuff that happened in the 80s, they thought there was
Yeah.
all these, sacrifices that turned out as a bunch of crap. So there's a lot of this stuff that has come out, and then they realized, okay, people were just losing their minds and exaggerating. So now it's when anything sounds kind of wow, like a big thing like that, people just automatically want to dismiss it, when obviously that's not the smartest thing to do. Like I said, Epstein right there, that just proves that the craziest, outlandish things that you could imagine does happen.
Yeah.
And so in this case, like you said, these conspiracies, what those people are saying would make a lot of what these two did and said afterwards make sense, because if you throw all those theories out, a lot of their crap doesn't make sense. A lot of what happened doesn't make sense. The government coming in and helping them, and at what level, none of that makes sense.
I know. And I know some really smart people that believe that, It's not just
Tinfoil
like
hat people.
it's not just tinfoil hat people, no. Roberta says there might have been an injunction on the Tapa 7, so maybe that's why they couldn't talk.
And I talked to I asked Lizzy about this, and she didn't really have an answer, because she's not an international lawyer or anything, but that was one of my questions: is that injunction, is it enforceable in another country? So like, let's say that they immigrated to Canada, United States, Australia, wherever. Is that injunction enforceable there? Could they do that? Could they speak then?
Good question.
And injunction or not, I'm just going to say this, and maybe it's just the United States, just saying, injunction or not, especially after all this time, something would have been leaked. Somebody would have spoke to somebody, and it would have been leaked. Now, would it be able to be specifically tied back to one of them? Probably not. But the wall of silence that has gone on with this case is unprecedented, as far as I'm concerned, as anything I've seen in my country. It would have been leaked. I mean, it just would have.
Yeah, and I think they've got the most severe of law firms to defend them. Do you know Pat Brown? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She got her book taken down like really quickly off Amazon because of them, didn't she?
Yeah.
They
People have
have
been
power.
sued. It's odd. It's very odd. And injunction, again.
There's ways around it. There's got to be, right? If they had some kind of guilt and they knew what really went on, they could have got that information out there somehow, I think,
Unless they were part of it.
Unless they were part of it, exactly, right?
Right.
Unless they've got a really strong reason, a really strong motive to sweep this under the carpet,
And the other thing is, all these years later, they're still going after people that say anything negative about them. Still, and they still have that power. And again, that's not just something that you got because your government feels bad for you because your child was kidnapped in a foreign country. It's just odd. And again, I would not want books and movies and documentaries out there being made about me that I killed my kid But on the other hand, in my mind, as long as that stuff's being out there, her story's still being out there. And there's still a chance that maybe one way or another, find her body or find her alive. Her story's still out there. I've seen interviews with parents who have had their kids. They don't care what people think at the time. All they want is the story to not get buried, not get lost, because we all know that's what happens after a certain period of time. Another story comes along and it becomes bigger news. They would do anything to keep their kid's story out there so people are aware of it. And, you know,
that's a really good point. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't like it, but hey, it's out there. At least people are reading. Hey, some 100 million people read that book. Cool. At least there's 100 million people that are looking for or thinking about my daughter and, you know, whatever.
Do you know, I've heard Peter Hyatt say that exact same point that point you just made there.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. It's a really good
Because I'm
point.
smart like Peter Hyatt. No, I don't know.
Well, as smart as you are you able to say poo it for genetic code?
It's a poo-poo it. A poo-poo it. I didn't think about that. I do say that sometimes. Just poo-poo it. Okay. All right, I'll go on mute. You can finish this.
Okay.
And keeps us focused.
And what about Sean and Emily? What have you said to them about their big sister?
They're really good. I mean, they're at an age really where they're still quite young, and I guess it hasn't had the same impact on them as if they were a little bit older. They do talk about Madeleine. They pick up things and say Madeleine's, you know, and that's fine, but they're really good.
I think that's, you know, something that is, many people have said to us that this is a parent's worst nightmare, and it is. It truly is, and it's as bad as you can possibly imagine. But you know, if all three of the children had been taken, it could have been even worse than your worst nightmare. And we've got to be strong for them. You know, they're here. They do bring you back to earth, and we cannot, you know, grieve. One, we did grieve, of course we grieve, but ultimately we need to be in control so that we can influence and help in any way possible, not just Sean and
I'm sorry that I pause it so much, but can you believe what he just said there? He had to stop himself saying, we just cannot continue
Keep
to grieve.
grieving. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what he was actually saying.
Yeah, and he did. He caught himself. He didn't do a very good job catching himself, I don't think. Again,
then,
3 weeks. I mean, that should be a running banner underneath. This was 3 weeks after she was kidnapped, because if you didn't know better, you're thinking, oh, okay, wow, that's really sad. That happened a long time ago for you. No, just happened.
Exactly, Roberta. Why would you use the word grieve if the child is not dead? Why did he say grieve?
If your kid's kidnapped and you think that they're kidnapped, you're not grieving. You're not grieving. You're hysterical. You're worried. You're not grieving.
I just cannot believe that he said basically, well, the silver lining basically is the fact, what if we had lost all three? You know, at least, you know, it wasn't all three that got taken. It could have been a lot worse.
So it's almost
that
like he's trying to explain his behavior. I'm not a friggin' mess because I only had one kid kidnapped. So just so you know, because if I had all three, then I would be a total mess. But I'm not a mess because I only had one kid kidnapped. So keep that in mind, you people. Don't be judging me, because I'm over here in happy land, happy that I still have the two that weren't kidnapped, and I'm going to focus on them because that's what's important right now.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying, and it's
staggering.
Weird behavior. Weird behavior.
Yeah, genetic. Minimizing big time. And again, what?
Well, and to go back to what she was saying, the other two, they're really young, but they're doing great. They're doing great. Yeah. You know, they'll pick things up and say Madeleine, and that's fine. And it's like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they were little, but how do you even say something like that and not tear up? Even if you tear up for the fact that you know that at some point your other two children are going to go through a serious grieving process about their sister being gone at some point. And you hurt for your kids when they hurt. She didn't look like she was going to be hurting for them at all. And they're fine. They're fine.
Tracy, the other two twins were in the same room and they slept through it all. They were fine. A lot of people point out how strange it was because there was, as you can imagine, there was people all over the apartment, in and out. A lot of noise, and the twins slept through it all. So it stands to reason that it's possible the reason Madeleine was gone because it was an accidental overdose. From the doctors.
Anomaly, but the investigation.
And because of them, the day may come when you have to leave here and go back to the UK. I know you've got no plans to do so at the moment, but how do you think you're going to feel if that day comes and you have to go to the airport and fly back?
I can't think about that, Ian, to be honest. I can't think about going home without Madeleine. So.
I notice you've got Madeleine's cuddly toy with you as always. How did that start, and what comfort does it bring you?
Where did it come from, or?
No, how did the idea come to just have it in your hands all the time?
Well, it's something that Madeleine has with her every night, and if she's upset or not well, then she has Cuddle Cat, and so it provided me with a little bit of comfort. It's something of Madeleine close to me.
This is International Missing Children's Day. I mean, I guess Madeleine's had more publicity than just about every missing child in the world put together. I'm sure you're very grateful for that. Why do you think it has provoked such enormous public support, of which I don't think we've ever seen before?
I think there's a conglomeration of circumstances that have come together in this situation. The fact that we're on holiday, very safe resort, recognised for that. And of course, the world has changed in terms of information technology and the speed of response, in terms of the media coming here and us being prepared to some extent, use that to try and influence the campaign. But above all else, it's touched everyone. Everyone. You don't have to be a parent for this to have a major impact on you. And I think it's also been very, very important, and some of the things which we have done and said, which we didn't realise what impact they would have, but so many thousands of people are doing small things to help us find Madeleine, because the worst feeling was helplessness, the absolute worst, that we had no bearing on finding her. But once you start to do that, then you start to feel a bit better. And I hope we're going to look back at the end of all this and say that we have done everything in our power, but also that other people are helping in so many.
God, Peter Hyatt would be all over that there, what he just said. At the end of this, once we look back at the end of this, we're going to think such and such. Why on earth are they allowing themselves to even imagine an end to this? They're obviously talking about, once it's kind of being accepted that she's gone, right?
That's what it sounded like.
I mean, it didn't sound like they were meaning the end of this is going to be us getting Madeleine back.
Well, because
right?
I mean, if that were the case, you would think you would say that when this is over, when we have her back. I mean, that affirmation, and you would think that would be the normal, not just say when this is over and leave it at that. No,
he's allowing an acceptance of a finality to this whole ordeal, because he knows she's gone. Even
if it was, let's say it was the accident, she fell behind the couch, or an overdose with the drugs. Yeah, I agree with you. They do seem like they're talking in terms like she's already gone. But still, why are they still not upset then?
I know, right?
I mean, whether she's gone or not, but in fact, even knowing she's gone would almost make you upset too, because
either way, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't know. These people are weird.
Many other ways, and they feel that they are part of it.
Does it worry you that people might start to lose interest as time goes on, the media coverage diminishes inevitably?
For me, we know that the media coverage is not going to last a long time. It's lasted much longer, and we have been much, much more successful in driving our message out than we could ever possibly have imagined. personally, I think it's gone beyond that at the minute, and that there is a feeling with many, many people out there that they will not allow this to happen. And we know that, and we pray that it doesn't happen again, but when it does, the speed of the next response and the template we have set will alter it. And there has been so much goodwill and humanity out there that it really has restored, that one evil act actually has resulted in so much good.
Where do you go from here? There's talk of travelling around Europe. Have you got any firm plans as yet?
We haven't got any firm plans. We're likely to travel in a few places in Europe, but as yet, no definite plans.
But you've got no plans to go back to the UK for the foreseeable future?
No.
I think that everybody has just been incredibly impressed with you as a couple and how you've dealt with this. There was a period after a week or so where you looked as if you were almost broken, and who could not understand that? And then there seemed to be a sort of a strength come from somewhere. Is that a fair point? Is that what happened, and what brought that about?
I think that's definitely true, isn't it?
Certainly, you know, at the end of that first week, there was so much emotion that we had spent, and we actually had a period where we discussed this openly, that we felt devoid, completely devoid of emotion. And the analogy that I like to use is a bit like when we were students and you got to your overdraft limit and you'd gone beyond it and there was just nothing left in the tank. I think physically and mentally were shattered. But you know, as you gradually get more on an even keel, we started to get back into the black. And we'd also worked tirelessly behind the scenes to put support mechanisms in place, including our legal team, the response with the fund, which was really driven by offers rather than us thinking that we needed it. And once these were in place, then it helped us to focus on what we really needed to focus on.
Well, everyone who's watching, who's been following Madeleine's case over the past 3 weeks, just wishes you all the best. Thanks very much, Gerry. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of obvious what we all think about that, right? It's just so sad.
And him talking about, you know, I don't know, you know, hey, whatever, good for you. But if my kid was still missing 3 weeks later, I'm not going to be thinking about the lessons learned from my daughter being missing to help future people that it happens to. And talking about, you know, the template that's been created. Because how can there be a template created? It's still, it just started. For a template on how to handle missing kids in foreign countries, you need to be a little further along in the process, because 3 weeks in, how do you know if your template, you know, the steps you think should be part of this template is actually even good, right? You don't know. You don't know if the case has already been screwed up to high heaven. You don't know anything. But he's talking like, again, if he knows she's dead, then yes, it's okay. You are going to think, not you are, but it's makes more sense to be thinking about things like that than to be thinking, where is my daughter? There's no template if my daughter's still missing.
You're not even thinking about that, are you? It just doesn't enter in your headspace.
No, not at all. Well, I was thinking about how maybe I kind of answered my own question in my mind for myself, is how they're, even if she had died, why do they still look composed there and not a complete mess? Because their daughter's dead. But again, they've had those 3 weeks, and you know, your self-preservation can be quite the motivator. So they know she's dead. They probably are grieving. If you know, if it was an accident, of course they're going to grieve. But their self-preservation, which is to get people to not look at them as you know, somebody that might have done something. So they don't want to get arrested. They don't want to lose their other kids. So they have a motivation to, in their mind, not be a basket case. But in my mind, it's actually, makes you look worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if they got that advice, you know, to try and show no emotion, then that's very bad advice.
Yeah, you know, and I remember like watching some documentaries and stuff from like the 70s and stuff, like some of those kids that like ended up on our milk cartons. I think that was the advice that was told to them back then. You know, one of the things is use your child's name a lot to try to, you know, humanize her and you know, blah, blah, but don't become too emotional because they will feed off of that. But, you know, we're talking about the 60s and 70s. I don't, why would somebody advise anybody now to do that?
I know.
And Roberta, so can someone explain to me why they're getting money from the government at all anyways? I mean, is that what happens when you have a child kidnapped over there? The government gives you money? What is that about?
Roberta, do you know? I don't know enough about that side of things. Another 350 grand, what, going into the fund? I know that there's another YouTube creator out there. I think they're actually from Ireland that were looking into some of the dodgy stuff with the company that they set up. I can't remember the specifics, but all sorts of messy stuff. I've got this link here that Carrie put up. This is from Heidi Ho, from Liz's channel, about the McCanns not physically searching for Madeleine. So let me just play this.
And I've spoken to a lot of people over the weeks local people who'd given up a lot of time. You've talked about the support that they've given you. I met people who didn't go to work for more than a week because every day they were down on the beach searching the streets. Did you, as a mother, Kate, just sometimes think, I've got to go and be out there with them, I want to go and just physically look as well?
I mean, I did. I mean, we've been working really hard, really. Apart from the first 48 hours, as Gerry said, were incredibly difficult, and we were almost non-functioning, I'd say. But after that, you get strength from somewhere. We've certainly had loads of support, and that's given us strength. And it's been able to make us focus, really. So we have actually, in our own way, it might not be physically searching, but we've been working really hard and doing absolutely everything we can, really, to get Madeleine back.
Esta antiga funcionária do Tapas conta que de imediato vários colegas deixaram o trabalho para ajudar nas buscas. Enquanto isso, nas horas que se seguiram, durante quase todo o tempo, os McCann permaneceram no apartamento.
Os meus colegas ficaram indignados porque eles foram. Um deles até ficou com os pés vermelhos, cansados. E ficou indignado porque ele foi, não era nada a menina. E os pais...
Well, that confirms it. That's from the horse's mouth. She literally said we may not have physically searched for her. She said it herself.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You know, I don't. Even if I'm not going anywhere, and I can't find my car keys, I can't think straight until I find my friggin' car keys.
Yeah.
You know, I will search. I was like, okay, you know what? I don't need them. I'm not going to need them till like Tuesday. I'm good. I'll sit down, start watching TV. Nope, it's bugging the crap out of me. I got to find my car keys, right? How do you do that with a kid? How do you not? What are you doing in that apartment? What are you doing? How are you even functioning?
How is that possible? How is it possible to remain within those walls when you know she's not there?
Right. That's the thing. Like, just the fact that your child is gone and you don't know what they're going through, supposedly, you'd be crawling out of your skin, let alone crawling out of the apartment. Yeah. I would assume that those four walls feel pretty friggin' suffocating. You know, there's been a lot of times where you hear stories about kids that go missing and the police have to tell the family, you know what? Yeah. You go home and get some rest. You've been out here for 12 hours, whatever. We're going to keep looking. You go home. And most of the time in the interviews, you see that like one of the parents is like, nope, not leaving until I find them, you know. Where is that with them? Where is that? But again, would you go out in the cold and walk around till your feet are red in the dark and bumping into things? Would you put all that energy into something that you knew was completely fruitless?
I know,
maybe not.
Yeah.
But again, you probably should, because at least it would look better.
I know. It's I mean, I try and be fair about it, right? When I'm convinced they're guilty, right? And I agree with Liz because she also makes the point that she's not saying that they are literally responsible for her death. That might not be the case. It may just be a complete accident, but they're still culpable through negligence, right? Like, I'm prepared to believe that as well. And like, I try and be fair and I try and imagine that they are telling the truth and it was an abduction. But there's absolutely, you can't make that argument. There's nothing to
No.
attach
No.
that argument to at all, you know? I mean, the way that Kate described the shutter being open, which was impossible. You know, it didn't have that facility to be open wide, and the only fingerprints that they found on the window were hers.
Right.
And also Gerry, his initial story was that he went into the front door when he last checked on her, but then once they realised that the kidnapper story coming in through the window couldn't work, he had to change it to coming in through the patio at the back so that
Yeah.
it was explicable how a kidnapper could get in and out. Everything. It's like I was pointing out to Liz, you know, the kind of Occam's razor, you know?
Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
you know, when there's so many different possibilities, almost always the simplest one tends to be the true one, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've seen parents where their children have died through negligence or, you know, even from abuse, and they try to cover it up. But even then, they at least try to look the part. I mean, like we were talking about with Chris Watts, he tried to look the part. He failed miserably, but he tried to look the part. He at least tried. These two actually literally do not look like they're even trying. They really don't look like they're trying.
I know.
And if they are trying, then they're failing miserably, just like Chris Watts did.
Yeah.
So JC says, doing everything we can to get Maddie back, short of physically searching. Right. Got it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You
Other than
try
that,
to get me to not look, you know?
we're doing absolutely everything possible, just not physically searching, obviously, you know.
Right. You know, and I do
Okay.
know in the olden days, they used to tell, you know, kidnapping parents, you know, stay at home in case the kidnappers call, or a missing kid, stay at home in case they call. Well, that was in landline days and shit like that. That's not a case anymore. And she wasn't at home. This was on vacation. So yeah, again, try to stop a parent for searching for their 3-year-old child that went missing and you're claiming is kidnapped.
Till my feet bled, I would search.
Yeah.
Roberta says they've had nearly 14 million off the government. It keeps the case open so no one can deep dive and get information as it's classed as an ongoing case.
See, and that's again right there. That leads into what you were saying, you know, these quote unquote conspiracy. This is not just a couple who may or may not have contributed to the death of their daughter and they covered it up because they didn't want to go to jail and didn't want their other kids taken away. For the government to go to that lengths, there's something else, right?
It feels that way, yeah. It does. It feels like there's a lot of people that have a good reason for this narrative to continue. And also, from what I read and what I hear from, you know, the guy that does that podcast in Australia, is it Mark Sonokanuko?
I'm just gonna say Mark. I don't say his last name because I screw it up every time.
Yeah. Like he's pointing out as well that this new suspect that they have, there's just zero evidence. I think the only sort of tangible evidence is the fact that he was in the same area at the time, and that there's a phone ping of a mast that's in the area, but that covers such a wide area. It's just so, the evidence is so thin, and it looks like they're just happy to attach this on to someone like this guy he's a legitimate creep anyway, you know. So let's just see if we can stick this on him.
Well, so that leads me to the question, like what Roberta was saying about them, not closing the case. If they're going to pin this on this guy, then the case would be closed. Then wouldn't the information
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
become available?
yeah, good point. Maybe they just want to direct attention towards this, even though they've got no real desire of a finality to it. They're maybe just trying to redirect attention. Who knows, right?
Well, and the other thing is she's 18 now. This guy's name just came up. I mean, charged him. I don't know if they've talked about him for years, but just within the past, year and a half, 2 years,
Yeah.
right before she turned 18, all these years, he was never talked about. But now that she's 18, now all of a sudden they found the guy. They've concluded it's the guy based on what? I don't know. Is it a coincidence that all of a sudden this suspect is being charged with something right before she turns 18?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what was there, but I think at any given time in a decently sized group of people in an area, you're probably going to find a couple people, if you search, that have a history of some sort of sexual deviant stuff in their background. So the fact that he was there, that doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't, does it? Yeah, because just by the law of the odds, there's going to be a few sex offenders round about that area. They just stand to reason.
And the pinging thing, working in telecommunications, especially cell phone stuff, back then, their ability to narrow down like they can now was non-existent. That was non-existent back then by using cell towers. You couldn't narrow down to, say within 100 feet. It was a very wide radius. In fact, a lot of times, depending on how many cell towers are in the area, it could be miles. This is your area. You pinged on this. Here's your 2-mile radius, somewhere in there, so it's not the same as it is now. So the fact that he pinged on something doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I hear that all the time about phone pings. They're just not reliable. They're not specific. They're not they can't pinpoint areas, right? And completely.
Well, they're getting better at doing it, but part of it is GPS, and that's not necessarily cell tower stuff. That's GPS. A lot of phones, smartphones have the GPS going. They have them on so they can have their Find My Phone. So, that's a lot of it.